It was a bright and warm morning when Ibrahim Traoré drove his old military vehicle into the base. The sun was just starting to rise, and a cool breeze swept through the camp. The sound of the vehicle's engine echoed in the quiet air. It wasn't a loud engine, but it was a noisy one. It rattled and groaned with every bump in the road, making a sound that didn't match the usual powerful vehicles the soldiers were used to. The vehicle itself was a sight to see. Its once dark green paint had faded over time, and the metal parts were covered with scratches, dents, and rust. The tires looked old, and some of them had deep grooves that showed they had been used for years. It was clear that this wasn't the newest model, and it was far from the kind of vehicle soldiers usually drove. As Ibrahim parked it on the side, the soldiers gathered nearby couldn't help but stare at the old thing. Some of them chuckled, exchanging glances and shaking their heads. "Looks like it belongs in a museum," one of the younger soldiers muttered with a laugh, his voice carrying across the camp. "Maybe it's a joke. What's he doing here with that?" another soldier added, his voice filled with mockery. As more soldiers gathered to look at the vehicle, the comments grew louder. The laughter and teasing spread quickly. Some soldiers didn't even try to hide their amusement, openly laughing at what they saw. It wasn't just the vehicle's appearance that made them laugh. It was the fact that a man in uniform, who was clearly part of their military force, was driving it. Everyone was used to seeing sleek, well-maintained vehicles, ones that showed strength and power. But Ibrahim's vehicle was none of that. It looked like something that had been left behind, forgotten in a garage somewhere for years. Ibrahim didn't mind the laughter, though. He kept his head down and walked past the crowd, his face calm and focused. His steps were steady, as if he had grown used to the attention. He didn't seem to care about the mockery, nor did he stop to explain himself. He had a job to do, and he was going to do it, no matter what anyone thought about his vehicle. One of the younger soldiers, eager to join in on the fun, stepped forward. "Hey, Colonel, did you get that from a junkyard?" he called out, his voice full of playful teasing. The other soldiers laughed at the comment, their eyes still fixed on the vehicle, but Ibrahim simply gave a small smile and kept walking toward the commander's office. He didn't respond to the joke, and he didn't let the laughter affect him. As Ibrahim disappeared into the building, the soldiers continued to talk about the vehicle. The jokes didn't stop right away, and for a moment, it seemed like they would never end. Some of the younger soldiers even started making bets, wondering if the vehicle would make it through the day without breaking down. But Ibrahim wasn't worried. He had been through far more than a few jokes and teasing in his life. To him, it didn't matter what the soldiers thought of his vehicle. He had a deeper purpose, and he knew that the value of a person wasn't measured by what they drove or wore. He understood that strength didn't always come from appearances. Sometimes, the quietest people had the most to teach. As the day went on, and the soldiers got back to their duties, they continued to whisper about Ibrahim and his old vehicle, but something told them that there was more to this man than they realized. Little did they know, they were about to find out just how much they had underestimated him. As Ibrahim Traoré entered the base, the whispers about his old military vehicle grew louder. Soldiers who had seen him park it still couldn't believe their eyes. It was hard to ignore the sight of such a worn-out vehicle in a place filled with high-tech military equipment. Everyone in the camp knew the importance of having reliable, powerful vehicles for missions and training. The idea of driving something so old seemed strange to them. Throughout the morning, the mockery didn't stop. As Ibrahim walked from one end of the base to the other, he could hear the soldiers talking behind his back. It wasn't just a few jokes now, it was the entire camp laughing at his expense. Some soldiers would point at the vehicle and shake their heads. Others would make loud comments to each other, pretending they didn't care, but the humor in their voices was clear. "Isn't that supposed to be a tank? Looks more like a rust bucket," one soldier shouted across the yard. His friends burst out laughing, and a few others joined in. A young soldier, excited to add his own joke to the conversation, walked up to the vehicle and knocked on the side with his knuckles. "Anyone home?" he said, pretending to check if the old thing still worked. "Seems like it's about to fall apart." The group around him laughed even louder. They found it funny to make fun of the old vehicle, and no one seemed to think twice about the way they were treating Ibrahim. It was easy to make fun of something that looked so different from everything else on the base. The more the vehicle was mocked, the more the soldiers seemed to enjoy it. Some of the soldiers started a conversation about what kind of person would drive such a vehicle. "He must be some kind of joke," one of them said. "Maybe he's just here for the free food and a paycheck." Another soldier agreed. "Who would drive a piece of junk like that unless they were afraid to show their face? I bet he's not even a real officer." They laughed as they speculated about Ibrahim's rank and experience. To them, the vehicle seemed like proof that he wasn't an important person. Surely someone who mattered in the military wouldn't drive something so outdated. They couldn't understand why anyone would choose a vehicle like that. To them, it was a sign of weakness, something to be laughed at. The younger soldiers, full of energy and bravado, didn't realize that their jokes were getting harsher. Some of them even started to make bets, wondering if the vehicle would survive the day or if it would break down in the middle of the camp. One of them laughed loudly and said, "Maybe we should start a pool. Who thinks it'll still be running by the end of the day? I'm betting it won't make it past lunch." The jokes kept flowing, and the laughter spread across the base. No one seemed to think it was wrong to make fun of Ibrahim. He was just the guy with the old funny vehicle. His presence was a joke to many of them, and they treated him like one too. Ibrahim, meanwhile, didn't let the mocking words get to him. He had been through much worse than this in his life. He had learned long ago that people's opinions didn't define who he was. While the soldiers joked about him and his vehicle, Ibrahim kept his focus on his duties. He had no interest in proving anything to anyone. He knew who he was, and he was content with that. But as the day went on, the laughter started to feel less innocent. There was a sense that something bigger was coming. The soldiers might be laughing now, but their words would have consequences, and they didn't know it yet. But they were about to learn a very important lesson about judging people by their appearance. The laughter and teasing continued throughout the morning, but Ibrahim Traoré stayed focused on his duties. He moved through the camp, walking with purpose and handling his tasks with a quiet confidence that came from years of service. The soldiers still whispered behind his back, but he paid them no attention. It wasn't the first time he'd been underestimated, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Around noon, the camp suddenly became quieter. Soldiers started to notice that Ibrahim wasn't hanging around like he usually did. He had disappeared into the commander's office, and no one seemed to know why. It was unusual for him to leave the area without saying anything, especially when there was still work to be done. The soldiers who had been mocking him earlier exchanged confused looks. Some wondered if he was just avoiding them, while others guessed that he had gone to take a break. An hour passed, and then, unexpectedly, Ibrahim returned. But this time, he wasn't the same man who had walked in earlier. He was different. His usual calm expression was replaced by one of quiet authority. When he stepped out of the office, he was no longer just another officer among many. He walked with confidence, his shoulders straight and his eyes sharp. The first soldier to see him was one of the younger men who had been laughing at the old vehicle. He had just finished telling a joke about it when he caught sight of Ibrahim. The words froze in his mouth. This wasn't the same man they had been teasing. The figure standing before them wasn't just a low-ranking officer. It was someone far more important. As Ibrahim approached the center of the camp, he pulled a small stack of papers from his jacket. It was clear that these were official documents. The soldiers who had been gossiping about him earlier started to quiet down, sensing that something was about to happen. Ibrahim didn't speak immediately. Instead, he slowly unfolded the papers and held them out in front of the group. "Here," he said, his voice calm and steady. "These are the official rank orders for our unit. You'll find my name listed here." He pointed to a line on the page, and the soldiers quickly read the title written next to his name. Colonel Ibrahim Traoré. The words seemed to hang in the air, and the camp fell silent. The soldiers who had been laughing at his vehicle now stared at him in disbelief. They had thought he was just another officer, someone with a low rank who didn't matter much. But the truth was far different. Ibrahim wasn't just an officer. He was a colonel, someone with years of experience and a leadership position far above theirs. The realization hit them hard. Their faces, once filled with laughter, now turned pale. The joking stopped as quickly as it had started. The young soldier who had made the most fun of the old vehicle looked especially embarrassed. He hadn't expected this. None of them had. Ibrahim stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle in. He didn't need to say much more. The message had been delivered. It wasn't about the vehicle he drove or the jokes people made. It was about who he was and the experience he carried with him. As the soldiers processed the information, they started to look at Ibrahim in a new light. The man they had laughed at wasn't just a joke. He was someone they needed to respect. They had been wrong to judge him based on the condition of his vehicle. Ibrahim's rank, experience, and presence were far more important than any old military truck. Ibrahim didn't stay to hear their apologies. He simply nodded and walked away, his mission clear. He didn't need anyone's approval. His value wasn't in the things people could see. It was in who he was and what he had achieved. And now, the soldiers would learn that lesson, even if it took them a little longer to truly understand it. As Ibrahim Traoré walked away, the camp fell into an eerie silence. The soldiers, still stunned by the sudden revelation, stood frozen for a moment. No one knew what to say, and even the usual noise of the camp seemed to disappear. It wasn't just that Ibrahim was a colonel. He had been in the military long enough to gain respect, even if that respect was hard-earned. What shocked them the most was how they had all misjudged him. The first few minutes were the hardest. The younger soldiers who had laughed at Ibrahim's old vehicle were now shifting uncomfortably. They exchanged quick, nervous glances, unsure of what to do or say. They had underestimated him so completely that the realization felt like a punch in the gut. "Did anyone else know he was a colonel?" one soldier whispered, breaking the silence. A few heads shook in disbelief. The idea that the man they had so openly mocked was not only high-ranking, but also a person of great experience and wisdom was hard to process. It felt like the ground had shifted under their feet. The old vehicle, the one they had all thought of as a joke, now seemed like an afterthought compared to the man himself. He had been carrying a weight far greater than anyone had guessed. As the minutes passed, the tension among the soldiers grew. Those who had joined in on the mockery now felt the sting of their actions. The embarrassment spread quickly, and soon the group who had been laughing was scattered, each soldier retreating to a quiet corner to think. There was no pride left in their earlier jokes, no laughter. They had seen the man for who he really was, and it made them feel small. In the midst of the shock, the soldiers slowly began to understand something. They had learned a painful lesson, one they would not forget anytime soon. They had judged a man by the vehicle he drove, thinking that an old battered truck reflected weakness. But they had been wrong. The vehicle wasn't a sign of failure. It was a symbol of perseverance and wisdom. Ibrahim had chosen to drive it for a reason, and now they understood. For the next few hours, the camp was quieter than usual. The soldiers went about their work, but the atmosphere had changed. The laughter had faded, replaced by a sense of respect and contemplation. Some of the younger soldiers who had been most vocal in their jokes started to approach the more senior officers, asking for advice, seeking guidance. The respect they once reserved for the higher-ups had now been extended to Ibrahim, even if he hadn't explicitly demanded it. One of the senior officers, who had quietly observed the entire situation, spoke to the others in hushed tones. "Ibrahim's rank isn't just on paper," he said. "It's earned. He's been through more than you can imagine. That vehicle isn't a mistake. It's a reflection of who he is. Don't think for a second that a high rank means someone gets an easy ride. It's the opposite, actually." The words struck home. The soldiers who had laughed before now realized that rank didn't just come from position. It came from experience, from battle, from making difficult choices. They had mistaken humility for weakness, thinking that anyone who didn't flaunt their position or their success must not have earned it. But Ibrahim's calm demeanor and quiet strength were more powerful than any flashy vehicle or boastful display of power. As the day wore on, the camp started to return to its usual rhythm, but there was a new respect in the air. The soldiers, especially the younger ones, had learned something important. They would never forget the day they laughed at Ibrahim Traoré's vehicle, and the day they learned that true strength isn't always visible. It's something deeper, something that cannot be measured by appearance, but by the actions and experiences of the person who wears the uniform. And while the camp might have gone back to its normal pace, for those who had mocked Ibrahim, the memory of that shockwave would stay with them for a long time. A few days after the shocking reveal, the atmosphere in the camp had changed completely. The soldiers who had once laughed at Ibrahim Traoré's old vehicle now treated him with respect. They didn't joke about his car anymore, and whenever they saw him walking through the camp, they made way for him without hesitation. Even the young soldiers who had been most vocal in their teasing had become more respectful, their faces filled with a quiet humility. But the true test of their newfound respect came sooner than expected. One afternoon, word spread quickly through the camp that there would be a special exercise. It was a large-scale training mission designed to test the soldiers' abilities in difficult situations. It wasn't a simple drill. This was a full-on simulation of a battle scenario that would require teamwork, quick thinking, and careful planning. The mission was challenging, and everyone knew it wouldn't be easy. But there was something else about this exercise that made it stand out. Ibrahim Traoré had been assigned as the mission commander. At first, many of the soldiers were shocked. They had seen him as a man who didn't stand out, someone who was easy to overlook. The idea that he would lead such an important mission seemed strange to some. Even though they now knew his true rank, they still couldn't quite shake the image of the man who drove the old, noisy vehicle. Would he be able to handle the responsibility of leading such an important operation? But there was no time for doubts. The soldiers quickly learned that the exercise was going to be tougher than anything they had faced before. The mission involved coordinating across different parts of the base, using tactics, strategy, and problem-solving skills. They would have to act as one, responding quickly to unexpected challenges, and learning how to work together under pressure. As they gathered for the briefing, Ibrahim stood at the front. His face was calm, and his voice steady as he spoke. This mission is about more than just completing the tasks. It's about working as a team and pushing yourself beyond what you think you can do. There will be no easy way out. You must be smart, focused, and ready to handle the unexpected. The soldiers listened carefully, noticing that Ibrahim's tone wasn't the same as the others. He wasn't just giving orders. He was making sure they understood the importance of what they were about to do. There was no boastful confidence, no ego, just pure leadership. His experience spoke for itself. The mission began, and the soldiers quickly realized that Ibrahim's leadership style was different from what they were used to. While other commanders might have barked orders or rushed them, Ibrahim gave clear, calm instructions, always ensuring that the team understood their roles. He didn't shout or get frustrated when things went wrong. Instead, he stayed level-headed and guided them through the problems, step by step. At one point, the soldiers encountered a situation they hadn't anticipated. A simulated attack disrupted their plans, and confusion spread quickly through the camp. Soldiers started to panic, unsure of what to do next, but Ibrahim remained calm, walking from group to group, offering advice and reassurance. "Stay focused. We've trained for moments like this," he said, his voice steady. "Trust your team, and trust yourselves." His words brought a sense of calm to the chaos. Slowly, the soldiers began to regain their composure. They followed his instructions, working together to fix the situation. The mission continued, and despite the obstacles, they made steady progress. By the end of the day, they had completed the exercise successfully. It wasn't perfect, but it was a clear victory for the team. Afterward, as they gathered to debrief, many of the soldiers found themselves reflecting on the day's events. They had learned more about themselves and about their commander than they had ever expected. Ibrahim Traoré had not only proven himself as a leader, but he had also shown them what true strength looked like. It wasn't in the flashy vehicles or in loud commands. It was in the quiet confidence, the calm in the face of adversity, and the ability to lead when things were at their most difficult. The soldiers left the training ground with a newfound respect for their commander, knowing that they had just witnessed something powerful. They hadn't just learned how to follow orders, they had learned how to lead themselves, just like Ibrahim. As the days passed after the successful mission, the soldiers couldn't stop talking about Ibrahim Traoré. The exercise had been difficult, but the way he led them through the challenges had earned him their respect. It wasn't just his rank or his calm leadership that had impressed them. It was his ability to stay grounded and focused, no matter how tough things got. Every soldier felt like they had learned something important that day, not just about tactics, but about themselves and what it meant to be a true leader. But there was still a lingering question in the back of their minds. Could Ibrahim really lead them in an even bigger challenge? The camp was preparing for something much more intense. a real-world mission that involved high-level operations. This would be different from a training exercise. The stakes would be higher, and there would be no second chances. One afternoon, as the soldiers gathered for another briefing, they were told about the upcoming operation. It was a mission that would require precision, quick thinking, and absolute teamwork. The soldiers were told that they would be working with other military units and that they would need to prove their ability to work in a larger multi-unit team. As the officers explained the operation, one thing stood out. Ibrahim Traoré was the one in charge. At first, some of the soldiers exchanged uneasy looks. They had seen how calm he was during the training, but this was different. This was real, and they wondered if Ibrahim could handle the pressure of a mission that had such high stakes. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about a much bigger goal, one that would affect everyone. Ibrahim stood at the front of the room, listening to the concerns without saying a word. He could feel the weight of the soldiers' doubts. He knew that there were still some who thought of him as just the guy with the old vehicle. It was something he'd had to face before, and he wasn't bothered by it. What mattered now was the mission, and he wasn't going to let anything stand in the way of getting it done. The operation began the next day. As the soldiers moved into position, Ibrahim's calm presence was felt everywhere. There was no panic, no rushing. He made sure that everyone understood their role and kept things organized. He didn't try to take charge of everything. He trusted his team and knew that they had the skills to handle their parts. When things went wrong, as they often did, Ibrahim was quick to react. At one point, a sudden communication breakdown threw off their timing, causing a delay in one section of the mission. The soldiers could feel the pressure building, but Ibrahim didn't raise his voice. He calmly reassured everyone and immediately found a solution. "Don't worry. We've got this," he said, his voice steady. "Adapt and move forward." The soldiers followed his lead. The small problems they faced weren't enough to stop them. They adjusted and pushed on, working together as a team. As the mission went on, the respect for Ibrahim deepened. His ability to stay calm under pressure gave them the confidence to keep going. They saw now that he wasn't just a man with a high rank. He was a leader who could bring out the best in them. As the mission drew to a close, they realized that they had completed it successfully. The operation had gone smoothly, and the soldiers felt proud of what they had accomplished. More importantly, they understood that they had done it not because of their own abilities, but because of the way Ibrahim had led them. He had given them the tools they needed to succeed and had trusted them every step of the way. By the end of the day, the soldiers no longer saw Ibrahim Traoré as just a man with an old vehicle. They saw him for who he really was, a leader, a mentor, and a true professional. The mission had proven that his value wasn't in his appearance or the vehicle he drove, but in the strength of his character and his ability to inspire others. A few weeks had passed since the success of the big mission, and the soldiers who had once laughed at Ibrahim Traoré were now completely transformed. They spoke of him with a respect that had never been there before. The old jokes had stopped, and instead, they listened carefully when he spoke, eager to learn from his experience. Ibrahim's reputation as a leader had spread throughout the camp, and even other units began to take notice of his calm yet effective leadership style. However, as things started to settle into a new routine, a challenge loomed on the horizon that would test not just Ibrahim's leadership, but also the loyalty and trust he had built with his team. It wasn't an external threat that would test them, but an internal one. Rumors began to spread that there would be a new commander coming to take over the camp. This new commander had a reputation for being tough, ruthless, and someone who liked to make a statement. Many of the soldiers wondered if Ibrahim, despite his recent successes, would be able to handle the pressure of a commander who would be far more strict and unyielding. At first, Ibrahim didn't seem concerned. He knew the rumors were just that, rumors. But as the days passed and the whispers grew louder, he started to sense that the soldiers were uneasy. They were loyal to him now, and they didn't want to see his leadership replaced by someone else. The tension in the air was becoming hard to ignore. One morning, just as the sun was rising over the camp, the soldiers gathered for a briefing. They had been expecting to hear about new training exercises, but instead, the commanding officer announced that the rumors were true. A new commander was coming, and his arrival would happen sooner than expected. The room went quiet, and the soldiers exchanged nervous glances. They had gotten used to Ibrahim's calm, collected presence, and they weren't sure how to feel about the change. Ibrahim stood at the front, his expression unreadable. He had known this day would come. As a military leader, it was always possible that someone else would be brought in to take charge. But what mattered now was how he would handle the situation, both for himself and for the soldiers who had come to rely on him. "I know some of you are worried," Ibrahim said, breaking the silence. "And that's natural. Change can be hard. But remember this: leadership isn't about one person. It's about all of us working together. We've proven that we can handle anything as a team." The soldiers listened closely. They could see that Ibrahim wasn't angry or upset. He was calm, as usual, but there was something different in the way he spoke. It was as if he was preparing them for something bigger. They had learned by now that his words weren't just about the situation at hand. They were about guiding them through whatever challenges lay ahead. "We've made progress because of our teamwork, and nothing is going to change that," he continued. "If a new commander comes in, we will show them who we are. We will show them the strength of this team." The soldiers, though still nervous, felt a sense of reassurance in his words. They had come to trust Ibrahim, and his confidence gave them a sense of hope. Ibrahim's leadership wasn't about being the strongest or the loudest. It was about knowing when to stand firm and when to adapt. He had always treated them as equals, as people who could rise to the challenge. Now, he was asking them to do the same in the face of uncertainty. As the day went on, the soldiers began to talk amongst themselves. They knew that whatever happened with the new commander, they were ready. They had learned valuable lessons under Ibrahim's leadership, and now they felt stronger than ever. The next few days were tense as the soldiers waited for the new commander to arrive. But in the back of their minds, they all knew one thing: no matter who came in, they had already proven their worth. They weren't afraid of change, and with Ibrahim's guidance, they were ready for whatever came next. Ibrahim's words had planted a seed of confidence in them. They didn't need to fear the unknown. They had already faced challenges and come out stronger. The soldiers were no longer the same group that had laughed at the man with the old vehicle. They were a team, united and ready to face whatever the future held. The day the new commander arrived, the camp was filled with anticipation. The soldiers had heard the rumors about him being tough and unyielding, and they couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Ibrahim had been the one who led them through so much, and now they were facing the unknown. The change felt like a big shift, and the soldiers couldn't shake the feeling that the camp would never be the same again. As the sun set on the horizon, a sleek black vehicle pulled up at the entrance of the camp. The soldiers stood in formation, their eyes fixed on the vehicle. A tall man stepped out, his sharp uniform and commanding presence immediately noticeable. The new commander had arrived, and with him came a heavy silence that hung over the camp like a cloud. Ibrahim stood among the soldiers, watching the arrival with calm composure. He didn't show any signs of worry, but the soldiers could tell that he was feeling the weight of the situation. He had led them through difficult missions, earned their trust, and now this new figure had entered their world. The new commander's first words were stern and to the point. "This camp is not a place for weakness," he said, his voice cutting through the air. "From now on, I expect discipline and results. There will be no room for mistakes." The soldiers stood still, unsure of how to react. They were used to Ibrahim's calm, patient leadership, and this new commander's tone was much harsher. There was no kindness in his voice, no invitation to ask questions or offer feedback. It was clear that he expected respect simply because of his rank. But as the new commander finished speaking, something unexpected happened. Ibrahim, who had been standing quietly at the back, stepped forward. His presence was steady, unshaken by the new commander's arrival. "Sir," Ibrahim said, his voice calm but firm, "I understand the need for discipline, but I also believe in the strength of a team that trusts each other. We've worked hard to get where we are, and I think you'll find that this unit is strong because we support one another." The new commander raised an eyebrow, his eyes narrowing slightly. The soldiers held their breath, wondering how he would respond. It was rare for someone to speak up like this, especially in front of a new commander. But Ibrahim wasn't just any soldier. He had earned his place, and his confidence showed. After a long pause, the new commander's expression softened, just a little. "We'll see if your team lives up to your words," he said. It wasn't a dismissal, but it wasn't a promise of approval either. As the days went by, the soldiers began to notice something. The new commander's tough exterior didn't change, but Ibrahim's leadership remained strong, even in the face of this new authority. Ibrahim didn't try to overrule the commander's decisions, but he kept guiding his team in his own quiet way. The soldiers respected the new commander's rank, but they knew that Ibrahim was still their true leader. The tension between the two leaders wasn't lost on the soldiers, but what they quickly realized was that Ibrahim's leadership wasn't based on strict rules or fear. It was built on trust, respect, and the ability to see each person's value. They had learned to think for themselves, to take responsibility for their actions, and to work together as a true team. The new commander, though still tough, started to see the difference in Ibrahim's approach. While he maintained his strict orders and demanded discipline, he couldn't ignore the success of the team under Ibrahim's influence. The soldiers weren't just following orders, they were committed to each other, and they had a bond that the new commander couldn't easily break. As time passed, the soldiers knew they had learned something important. They had grown under Ibrahim's leadership, and that growth had nothing to do with the vehicle he drove or the rank he held. It had everything to do with the way he led them, not by force, but by earning their trust and respect. The new commander never fully embraced Ibrahim's style, but he respected the results. And for the soldiers, that was enough. They had come to realize that true leadership wasn't about rank or appearance. It was about the strength of character and the ability to inspire others to be their best. In the end, they knew that no matter who came or went, the team they had built would stand strong, because with Ibrahim Traoré leading them, they were ready for anything.